Welcome along, explorer. Things are getting a bit dull down here on planet Earth, so let's go on an adventure and search out some science secrets that are hidden in shadows across the solar system. It's a brand new Fun Kids Science Weekly. My name is Dan. This is the only place in the universe that uncovers what's really happening in the world of science. We are the greatest podcast in the galaxy. Thank you for being there. This week, we'll hear why animals can be confused for criminals. It's all to do with whether they have fingerprints.
Some animals actually do have fingerprints in the way that we conceive them. So incredibly, koalas, for example, have got fingerprints that are almost indistinguishable from ours.
Also in our Battle of the Sciences, you can hear about biomechanical engineering and how it helps people who have lost limbs.
So I look specifically at using some of the tools like 3D scanning and motion capture to understand how limbs fit and how they function. And basically, we're trying to beat millions of years of evolution that have made these hands and feet in the first place and try and do it better with modern day techniques.
And our Dangerous Dan takes us to Asia to hear about a creature the size of a kitten that's got the fight of a tiger. It's all on the way in a brand new Fun Kids Science Weekly. Let's start with this week's Science in the News. People are being asked to leave food and water out for hedgehogs because milder winter has affected their hibernation. The Jersey Hedgehog Preservation Group have encouraged people to leave out dishes of water and bowls of dry cat food. This is in Jersey, which is a channel island just off the coast of France, near the UK. Rescuers have said the food and drink would need to keep fresh for a few nights and benefit the teeth of mammals. This is because milder winters, as the world warms up, have meant hedgehogs need to stay active for longer. Normally they'll be hibernating, it's not cold enough, so they're off out and about, they're trying to find food, but other parts of the ecosystem that they would normally eat on maybe aren't around in the winter. So they've asked people that live there to leave out food and drink for them. It's a really strange thing, isn't it? It just reminds us that the changing world around us has much bigger impacts than just you in your life. It's affecting so much wildlife that we don't really think about. Something to remember, I would say. Also, a species of enormous hornets has found its way to Europe for the first time. The southern giant hornet is native to much of tropical Asia, but 4 of these immense insects were recently discovered in Spain. If these supersized beasts manage to make populations on the continent, experts say they could threaten humans, honeybees, and other animals. Experts say it's very worrying. These hornets are 3 centimeters long. It might not be huge in your eyes, but 3 centimeters for a hornet is massive. They say that if they stick around, they could have dramatic effects for local ecosystems because suddenly there is a predator where there hasn't been before, so the creatures that are there will be completely unaware and not know how to deal with these massive hornets. Again, it's just our changing world, completely altering what we know and our local ecosystem. And our final story this week, a scientist has created a unique musical way to take action on wildlife decline. Edward Martin from the School of Biological Scientists has taken a famous song by the band Sigur Rós and has broken it in places with silences. The silences show moments where the health of the world's wildlife was poor through the years. Let's take a listen. Edward hopes this can make us think more about the threats to wildlife and that we'll take action. Let's find out more. Edward Martin is here to tell us more. Edward, thank you so much for joining us. This is such an amazing way to showcase our changing world. What gave you the first idea to do it in this way?
Well, there's so much data around wildlife, and this is important data that I think lots of people need to kind of learn about. But a lot of it is presented with graphs, and for me personally, when I see a graph, I can understand it, I can read it, but I don't feel this sense of emotion. And I think if we want people to change their behavior, if we want them to try and help wildlife, maybe what we need to do is present the scientific data in a way that's emotional. And so for me, I love music. I find music very emotional. And I thought, could we take a song that people love, one that people feel very strongly about, and make it show the scientific data, and make it show how humans are impacting wildlife?
And this is presented not just as audio, but there's a video that goes along with it. So just tell us about the whole package. What is this project? What will it give us?
So the audio was the big focus for me, and that's the original research that I've done. I was invited to share this with lots of people who work in the UK, work protecting wildlife. And as I was going to be in front of a big crowd of people, I thought, oh, you know what will go really well with the sound, which I think works really, really well, is a video, something to kind of convey the time as it's going through. So for the video, what I did was I put together old home movie footage, things from documentaries from all over the world. And it's trying to show the progression through time of the song, because the first 5.3 seconds of the song, that's the year 1970. The next 5.3 seconds, that's 1971, and it moves through time like that. And so for the video, I used clips from 1970 at the start, then 1980, sort of a minute in, and 1990 to try and keep people thinking of how this moves through time and how wildlife has been affected by people over the past 50 years.
And through those 50 years that you've represented by these small chunks of the song, it starts to glitch. It starts to go wrong. There are silences which are just so incredibly jarring, because the song by Sigur Rós, Hoppy Polla, is this wonderfully majestic and kind of romantic. It's almost like a fairy tale from a band who I think are from Iceland, right? So talk us through the silences and what they mean when you're thinking of the data that you're trying to show in this song.
So the data that we're showing it's a very kind of big data set. It's measured. It's been measured every single year since 1970. So that's the 50 years that we're talking about. And each data point is measured compared to the year 1970. So 1970, they say, we're going to take that as being full. That's like the full wildlife. And then each year is measured compared to that. And what they're doing is they go around thousands and thousands of different groups of animals, and they're counting how many animals are in those groups. And so if in 1970 you had 1,000 buffalo in a herd, then by 1975 you counted them and there was only 700, then that's the kind of difference that this data set is measuring. And it does this for thousands of different animals all over the world, and it's all averaged down to give one number per year. And that's what this is based on. So your number is 1 in 1970, then in 1971 it goes to maybe 0.99, and that's what's being used to delete the sound, or to decay the sound, because the amount that's being deleted is the amount that's lost compared to 1970. So in 1970, those first 5 seconds, nothing is deleted from the sound. It's the song as if you bought it, listened to it at home. But then in 1971, just one little bit, 1% of the data is being deleted, and you can just barely hear that. But as time goes on, that number is dropping, and more of the sound is being deleted. And by the time you get to the years towards the end of the song, representing 2015, 2016, 2017, a lot of that sound data is being deleted, because the herd sizes all the way around the world for lots of different animals are much, much smaller than they were in 1970.
So the general basic idea is the fewer animals there are in the world, the less of the song you can hear, the more broken up it is. And it's such a brilliant way to show this. The thing is, Edward, is this isn't new information for us, right? We know that the state of the world and our wildlife populations are in decline. We know about the climate crisis. Why do you think the way that you've shown it might point us to do something different and to really think about what's happening?
Well, I think you have people who are already aware of this and think about it a lot. And for those people, I think it's going to give them a strong emotional experience and something to really remember and think of, and remind them why they work to save wildlife, why they want to keep doing this, why they want to get their friends involved. But then also there's the people who maybe don't think of it as much of a problem. And for them, when they hear it, maybe they see graphs and they are not interested in them. They hear these numbers and it doesn't make sense to them. But if they hear that sound and they go, oh no, there's so much missing. This feels really sad to me. That might be what causes them to go, oh, I'm going to make these changes. I'm going to try and help out wildlife more.
It's a brilliant way of doing it, and it's such a beautiful song that you have vandalised, that you have brutalised, but in the name of incredibly meaningful and worthwhile science. Edward Martin, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Edward for talking all about that strange bit of music and how that shows us the change in wildlife around us. Quite a lot of our Science in the News stories we're talking about ecosystems, and it's always worth remembering how what we do every day, how it affects other animals that have to share this planet with us. Let's get to some of your questions then. If you have anything sciencey that you want answered on this podcast, you can be the star of the show. Let me hear who you are, what you like, exactly how urgent this question is by leaving it as a voice note for me on the free Fun Kids app or at funkidslive.com. I'll do the digging and I will drag one of my genius mates on to come and explain it for you. We'll have one of those in a sec. First up, it's from Perry, who is 10, who wants to know, why can birds sit on an electric fence without getting electrocuted? Now, it's because electricity is a current, it's the movement of electrons through particles, and electricity always follows the path of least resistance. It wants to get where it's going quickly and easily. Imagine you're on a car journey, right? You're going from A to B. You're going to go on the straightest road possible, probably, aren't you? You don't want to suddenly take a right and then take a left because it might drag you out of the way. You want to get there quickly and simply. It's the same thing for electricity. The metal that electric fences are made out of is a better conductor of electricity than the bones inside a bird. So it just continues travelling along the wire back down to Earth without taking a detour all the way through the bird. That's why they can perch on electric wires overhead. The current doesn't need to go through the bird because it just takes the straightest, most direct path of least resistance. If a human, no one should do this. If a human managed to stand on a fence and not touch the ground, it wouldn't be Earth directly either. So I guess the electricity wouldn't pass directly through them. Absolutely not something to try though, but it just makes you think. Electricity, it's a key thing to remember, it always takes the path of least resistance. Let's get on another question then. This is from Rory. What do you have for us, Rory?
Hello Dan, I'm Rory. I have 6. I live in Portugal and my question is, do animals have fingerprints?
Well, Rory, thank you for your question. And you know what? I have thought about animals so often doing this show, and we've focused on so many different creatures, and I've never thought about fingerprints or paw prints or footprints or whether they're unique. Let's find out, shall we, with Professor Simona Francese from Sheffield Hallam University. Simona, thank you for joining us. Is this an unusual question? As I say, I've never thought about it, but is it something that you've thought about before?
It is an unusual question. It's not the first time that it is asked, but I think last time that was asked was about probably 7 or 8 years ago by the BBC. They wanted to do a documentary on cat prints. So unusual, but not the first time.
Okay, so we're in good company here, Rory. Why do animals have fingerprints? So, Simona, do animals have fingerprints?
So the first answer I can give is yes and no. Yes, she doesn't explain a lot, but yes, as in some animals actually do have fingerprints in the way that we conceive them. So incredibly, koalas, for example, have got fingerprints that are almost indistinguishable from ours, even though our common ancestor, has lived millions of years ago. So it's strange the koala have got similar fingerprints, but yes, they have things like loops and whorls and arches, which are the characteristics or some of the characteristics that the humans have. I was reading somewhere that is so similar that actually they've been confused at crime scenes before, which begs the question, what was a koala and a human? What were they doing at the same time at a crime scene? But yeah.
A big robbery at the zoo, perhaps. I don't know.
Maybe.
So that's the yes part of it.
Yes,
you said yes.
yeah.
You said yes and no. What's the no?
That's right. So the no is that there are other animals that you can say that they have patterns or marks that are unique to themselves and that can be distinguished by other animals. but they're not in the same sense as our fingerprints. So they don't have those ridges and valleys and characteristics that we use to describe a human fingerprint. But they have unique features, let's put it that way. So for example, primates like gorillas or chimpanzees, they have this kind of characteristics, so they can distinguish these animals between one another. There are other animals that, again, have, like sloths, for example, they also have unique features. And again, they're quite different from humans. But then this question got me thinking, because what I do with fingerprints with humans, I actually am able to look and reconstruct the pattern of the fingerprint by visualizing the molecules that are present in the fingerprint. And so I know it's quite mind-blowing technology, it's an imaging technology. And what I'm thinking now, following this question, is could there be a different type of fingerprint for even more animals, different animals, that is a chemical fingerprint rather than a physical fingerprint?
Well, that's it. And they do have physical fingerprints that aren't on their fingers. I think I read that zebras, all of their stripe patterns, like tigers, all of their stripe patterns are different. So that's the way that we can use them, like a barcode of uniqueness.
Barcode, yeah.
Exactly. So with fingerprints, it's world famous that my fingerprint will be completely different to yours, Simona. Mm-hmm. My fingerprint is completely different to my mum's, my dad's. Is it just the way our skin grows over our finger?
Yeah, it's partially dictated by DNA. So your DNA plays a role in how the fingerprint will look like. But there's also environmental factors and the way the fetus grows in the mom's belly, that actually, and the pressure they're subjected to, the environment, the nutrients, actually they all shape eventually the fingerprint and how it looks like, which is also why twins' fingerprints are in fact different.
Yeah, that makes sense, because they're kind of growing at different rates in there, aren't they?
Exactly.
Well, listen, Rory, do animals have fingerprints? Yes and no. Some do, a lot of them don't. Brilliant to sort that out for you, mate. Thank you for your message. And also a massive thank you to Professor Simona Francese from Sheffield Hallam University. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you to Simona for coming on, talking all about animals in crime scenes. If you have anything sciencey that you want answered next week on the podcast, make sure you leave it as a voice note for me on the free Fun Kids app or at funkidslive.com, just like Rory, and then you can star on the show next week. Let's get to this week's Dangerous Dan, where we look at the most weird, mean, strange, unique creatures and things in the universe. This week, it's all about a beast the size of a kitten, but with the fight of a tiger. To find it, we need to head to South Asia to take a look at the rusty spotted cat. It's one of the smallest cats in the world, normally found in India, Sri Lanka and Nepal, but despite its tiny size, it's a fearsome predator. It grows to about 1/2 metre long. It's about 30 centimetres tall, which is like a ruler at school. It's the size of a kitten. They've got a soft grey coat with rusty coloured spots. It's where it gets its name. It's got big eyes, which make it look very innocent, like a cat from a Pixar movie, like Baby Puss in Boots, actually. Thing is, it's a brilliant hunter. It's very agile. It can climb trees and then leap on prey, and no one suspects it because it looks so sweet. It's an ambush predator, which means it waits, and then it strikes. It eats insects, birds, gets bigger with reptiles, even mammals. They're often called a mini tiger because they're fearless and brilliant predators. Not too harmful to us humans, although I'm not sure I'd want to pick it up and give it a little pss, 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 pss. So aren't you a cute cat? No, because it might get a bit annoyed. But it's mainly very fearsome as a predator around South Asia to loads of creatures that don't suspect it of being deadly at all. But it certainly is, which means the rusty spotted cat needs to go on our Dangerous Dan list. It's time for this week's Battle of the Sciences, where we try to discover once and for all what is the greatest science in the history of the universe. There have been many. There have been many that have tried, many that have failed, many that have fallen. Let's find out who is contesting today. To find out who is first in their field, we're heading to Brunel University. Dr. Sean Cullen is here to tell us why biomechanical engineering is the best. Sean, you've got 1 minute to start, and that begins in 3, 2, 1, go!
My name's Sean, and I work within a very subfield of biomechanical engineering, which is prosthetics. So prosthetic devices are devices that amputees wear to return lost functionality of missing limbs. It's nice and simple, like your shoes, but it replaces your whole foot, for example. Now, this is a difficult field to work in because every amputee is different and there's no universal rules on how prosthetics fit. Everything is made bespoke to the individual. So what I'm trying to do is to change how we fit and understand how prosthetics fit so that we can adopt more of a one-size-fits-all approach, and we can get more people up and walking again after they've had limb loss, or more people using hands again once they've lost their hands. So I look specifically at using some of the tools like 3D scanning and motion capture to understand how limbs fit and how they function. And basically, we're trying to beat millions of years of evolution that's made these hands and feet in the first place and try and do it better with modern day techniques. And I think this is interesting because we're giving people back the lost independence that they've had from losing their limbs in the first place. And that is really a nice feeling when you know you're returning functions back to people that have lost it.
And there's your minute. And a nice little sum up at the end there, Sean. So, you mention that you're trying to, fight or battle millions of years worth of evolution. And it's not just that. I feel like prosthetics is one of those things where they've advanced so much in the last 5 years, and it only blows your mind as to how they could advance in the next 5 years. Just tell us about the most recent developments with prosthetics and how much it's changed from the last, say, 50 years.
Yes, I would say within the last 5 years alone, the amount of electromechanical prosthetics has increased quite rapidly. So those are devices that have microprocessors, like mini computers in them, that help mimic how we would use those limbs biologically. So we've got microprocessor knees, microprocessor hands now, feet, and even some cases orthotics, which go around the existing limbs and not necessarily prosthetics, that kind of have their own brain and they work for us. That's something that 50 years ago was nigh on impossible. In terms of the techniques, they're still roughly the same, but 3D printing has fundamentally changed a lot of the way that we make particularly low-cost limbs and adaptable limbs. So there's been some real big advancements. And I would say what you mentioned about beating millions of years of evolution, we're almost there. So sprinting blades now can be more efficient than human running. Ironically, if you look at someone that's a single leg amputee, they run worse than someone that's a double leg amputee because of the way that running blades work. So actually, if you've lost both limbs, you can run better than if you'd only lost one, or in some cases better than if you'd still got two entirely. Based on the way that our ankles work when we run versus how the running blades work, you can just infinitely stack energy in these running blades until you hit peak velocity anyway.
I've heard before that it's not only an issue with physical limbs. So much of this is happening in our brain. It's psychological. It's psychological because if someone has to have an amputation, but they have had many, many years of having that leg or that hand, their brain gets a bit confused that it's not there anymore. Can you just talk about our understanding of how our brain works with our limbs and how that can change?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting topic. So I actually have some first-hand experience with this. So I'm an amputee myself, which is what kind of got me into the field. And what your brain does is it realizes that the part of the body that used to be there is missing. And so it tries to adjust. And what you tend to find, if you look at the brain, the part of the brain that normally responds to that limb that's now missing shrinks and kind of gets smaller, kind of like dies off, but that's not really a nice phrase for it. But it becomes less active. And what you tend to find is that synapses that are next to it overlap sometimes. And so the reason people get things like phantom limb sensations is actually the parts next to that bit in their brain firing and their brain accidentally thinking that limb part is activating again. So it's actually the rest of the brain struggling to cope with the fact that bit is missing. But there's been some really interesting research to show that actually the brain is a malleable kind of system and it can adjust and re-understand how your new body works. In the case of those that use prosthetics all the time, it kind of adjusts to understand that the prosthesis is now part of you. Which is weird because, you don't normally have parts of yourself that you can take off and leave places. But your brain starts to adjust and adapt and realize that that is your new body that you live with. Sometimes people refer to it as their phantom limb. And a quite common sensation for a lot of people that use limbs or use prosthetics or don't is that this limb gets shorter over time. So where I imagine my foot is actually right on the end of my stump, not where it used to be, which is, nearer the correct distance away from my foot. But if I imagine my prosthesis, then I know exactly where it is relative to the rest of my body. And it's kind of a weird feature that's how our brains just adapt and evolve to deal with these kind of differences and changes.
It seems that your science is maybe a more practical one than many other experts I've had that are kind of all to do with the ideas of breaking down sums and calculations, whereas you're building. What kind of stuff does your work actually involve every day when you do go to the lab or wherever it is?
So we've got a couple of different things we're working on at the moment. I would say my interest is in 3D printing. So using 3D printing to replace conventional prosthetic technologies. So most prosthetics in the UK are made out of carbon fiber, which is great because it's really strong. But once you've made it, you can't change it. So if it stops fitting, which happens all the time, if you've worn your shoes all day and you're walking, your limbs swell or your feet swell and your shoes get uncomfortable. Imagine that, but you're wearing a solid pair of shoes. You can't change them. You can't loosen the laces. So once they're made out of carbon fiber, they're really hard to modify. And what we're looking to do is incorporate some 3D printing elements to understand if we can subtly change the way that they fit and the way that they the shape of them, and see if that means people can wear limbs for longer or, for an extended period of time. So that's the sort of thing we look at. And then the other thing we like to look at is how they actually fit. So unlike your bones, which are rigidly connected to your skeleton, prosthetics are attached through the soft tissues in your limbs. So they're kind of loosely attached. And the ideal world that we'd have them rigidly attached to the body, much like our skeleton is, but we can't apply that through a skin barrier. So one of the things we look at is how well they fit and whether or not different forms of suction or mechanisms can keep them more well attached to the soft tissues around your remaining limb, for example.
Well, it's a brilliant fight for why biomechanical engineering should come first in our Battle of the Sciences League table. Dr. Sean Cullen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Really amazing to chat to Sean. It blows my mind how many different applications the scientists that we speak to have of using their expertise. So that's all about amputees and making new limbs. What a brilliant way of using someone's genius. Thank you very much, Sean. We'll get another expert on the show explaining why their field should come first next week. We can find out more about engineering, like Sean was talking about right now with an episode from our Sydney McSprocket Inspiring Engineering series. Sydney McSprocket, so Sydney is a genius, he's an expert engineer, and he tells us all about different inventions through history and who made them. This week, he's learning about one of the most famous mechanical engineers of all time, Nikola Tesla. Let's learn more.
Sir Sydney McSprocket's Inspiring Engineering, supported by the Royal Academy of Engineering.
Oh, hello. Nice to see you. I've just been working on my newest invention. It's a dishwasher, which not only washes the plates, but puts them away for you as well. There is a wee problem, however. I haven't quite got the sensitivity right, and some of the plates and glasses haven't fared too well. Oh, anyway, that's a job for later. I might have mentioned, I've been on the road meeting some fantastic young engineers. I recently went to a company called Imagination. These clever folk designed the chips which you will find in all sorts of electronics. Let's meet one of them.
My name's Pete. I'm an electronic engineer with Imagination Technologies. So I design parts of phones that display things on the screen. So if you maybe play games on your smartphone or your tablet, then the technology we design at Imagination displays what's going on onto the screen of the phone.
And was there anyone who inspired you to become an engineer?
One of the greatest engineers in history for me has got to be Nikola Tesla. You may have heard of him. He was a Serbian who lived in New York. He was a complete genius. And he did all sorts of things with pretty high voltage electricity, so think lightning bolts. His main project was he wanted to wirelessly transmit power to everyone, so think lightning raining down from the skies. Not the most practical of people perhaps, but he definitely thought big, and that's why I love him.
Well, this sounds interesting. Time for my latest invention, I think. It's called the Universal Inspiromatic. Inspiro for short. Ask it anything you like, and in the blink of an eye, it will give you all of the inspiring information you need.
Initializing search. T-E-S-P-I-R-O. SLA. Nikola Tesla. Loading report.
Nikola Tesla was an electronic engineer from the 1800s. He was an absolutely prolific inventor, coming up with the ideas for, amongst other things, the electricity that we still use in our homes today, light bulbs, and even lasers. As our engineer friend said, not all of Tesla's inventions were practical, but he never gave up, working right up to the end of his life.
He sounds like a man after my own heart. If at first you don't succeed, try, and try again. That's what makes a great engineer.
You might be surprised to hear that one of Tesla's accomplishments was to invent radio. Without Tesla, you wouldn't be able to listen to Fun Kids.
No, Fun Kids! That would be worse than a wet weekend in Dunoon.
Radio is often credited to Marconi, but it was actually Tesla who first harnessed radio waves. Radio works by a transmitter producing radio waves, which then can be picked up by a receiver. In the case of listening to Fun Kids, that is your radio at home. But the same technology is used by lots of other things, even remote control cars.
Fascinating. Did Tesla make the remote-controlled car then?
Funny you should ask. Tesla used a remote-controlled boat to demonstrate how he had harnessed radio waves. In 1898 at Madison Square Garden in New York, Tesla demonstrated his remote-controlled boat. The crowd were amazed. Some thought he had used magic. Others thought he was using brain waves. And others even claimed that he had a trained monkey driving the boat. The truth was, it was using radio waves, and the crowds loved it.
Right then, Inspiral. I'm suitably inspired. Let's get back on the road to find some more inspiring young engineers. See you soon.
Inspiring Engineering, with support from the Royal Academy of Engineering. Find out more about engineering, plus see some cool video demonstrations from young engineers at funkidslive.com/engineering.
You've got more with Sir Sidney McSprocket on his brilliant Inspiring Engineering series that you can listen to wherever you get your podcasts. It's on Google, Apple, Spotify, the free Fun Kids app, and at funkidslive.com too. That is it for our Fun Kids Science Weekly this week. We will be back next time with more adventures around the universe. Make sure you star in the show. Leave a question as a voice note on the free Fun Kids app or at funkidslive.com. And Fun Kids are our children's radio station from the UK. You can listen all over the country on our app, on that website, and if you've got a smart speaker, wake it up and ask it to play Fun Kids.